And so let's begin by breaking down for you how we've seen an escalation in the West Asia conflict. Day 1 to day 7, here's how the war played out. It started off with, of course, Iran being struck with decapitation strikes by Israel and by America. Operation Roaring Lion, Operation Epic Fury, almost immediately you had Iran also hitting back. On day 1, right after Israel and US hit out and struck the Iranian leadership hubs, you had Iran hitting back with strikes. Day 2 was dominated by that. In fact, 500 targets were decimated on day 1. Let's take a look at what happened on day 2 when you had Operation True Promise 4. That's what Iran called it. They were hitting back, and how? Targeting not just Israel, but targeting US bases as well across the Middle East. The GCC countries, the Gulf countries were targeted in particular. Many of them didn't see the conflict coming whatsoever. Let's move on to day 3. Why do we keep saying this conflict escalated? Because it had already spread now to the Gulf countries. Iran continued the attacks. US and Israel continued retaliating. And so there were non-stop drone attacks and missile strikes being reported. Iran's strategy was clear. They were targeting US bases. They were also targeting oil infrastructure. And this is where some of the Middle East countries got badly hit. The next day, there was a slight reduction in the tempo of Iran attacks. And this is what US and Israel were counting on. They were hoping on this reduction to continue their strikes and therefore win this war against Iran. If there was a reduction, it didn't make a difference because the war continued. On day 4, this happened, but now in day 7, the war continues. That tells you Iran hasn't completely stopped. On day 5, US also brought in bombers. As Iran continued the attack, US also continued their non-stop strikes, even bringing down an Iranian warship. Since then, a lot has happened. As we continue getting you all of the updates of what's played out in the last 24 hours, one of the questions that's constantly being asked also is what's been done so far by the international bodies, the likes of the United Nations. Now, even as we're tracking all of the updates that come in on this particular conflict, as US, Iran and Israel continue the fight, the United Nations at this point is also facing some tough questions. What's been done by the UN in the face of this conflict, in the face of this war, to actually stop it? How has the United Nations Security Council actually responded? It's essentially caught in a stalemate. These current strikes by US, Israel on Iran have put the UN Charter in the spotlight. And let me explain to you what the UN Charter says. In this case, what's relevant is Article 2, Paragraph 4, the so-called red line of international law. This particular article refers to and forbids unprovoked attacks on another country's territory or political independence. In theory, violators must stop. Leaders could face prosecution for crimes of aggression. I'll highlight that, prosecution for crimes of aggression. This is in theory. In reality, enforcement is rare thanks to Security Council vetoes. And this is where essentially UN is controlled by a handful of countries. History has repeatedly highlighted this. The UN's limits have been shown. In 2022, when Russia claimed self-defense to annex Ukrainian territory, what we know now as the Russia-Ukraine war, the UN General Assembly condemned it, sure, but a Security Council veto blocked any action. There was all of these terms, Putin is a war criminal, nothing was actually done. Let's go back to 2003, when US invaded Iraq over alleged weapons of mass destruction. At that point, the former UN General Secretary Kofi Annan called it illegal, yet the UN did nothing. Let's put out some of those details also on our screens. There were similar gaps that appeared during India's 1971 intervention in Bangladesh, NATO's Kosovo bombing in 1999. I can go on and on. This is a long list where nothing has been done. But we're also highlighting for you that in each of these conflicts, you saw a number of UN meetings taking place. 27 plus UN meets took place. On the Russia-Ukraine war, nothing happened. On Iraq's invasion, 5 UN meets. Again, nothing happened. Because what's also important to highlight here is that funding complicates the matter further. America, the world's largest UN donor, provides 22% of the regular budget and about 26% of peacekeeping funds. Cuts under the Trump administration have tightened the UN's hands even more. And so essentially the UN now is completely toothless. Let's talk about the P5 countries. US defends its strikes. It says it's all self-defense against Iranian nuclear threats and the fact that they're continuing with the nuclear program. And so they've also rejected any ceasefire call, saying this is self-defense. Russia and China are backing Tehran, calling the attacks aggression and blocking sanctions. UK and France offering milder critiques, condemning civilian casualties, but largely and clearly siding with America. Now, the bottom line is this. The Security Council is paralyzed. Civilians are paying the price. And that article that I referred to, it remains a bright line on paper, but often powerless in practice. There's no actual action that's taken by the UN, despite very clearly, in theory, there's a mention of what is to be done. What has the UN done in the last few days? The reason we played that particular soundbite from Melania Trump is because that was from the UN Security Council. And I'll bring in Pranay Upadhyay for more on this. Pranay, disappointing how the UN has responded so far to the crisis at hand. The United Nations has become a toothless body. Is it right to say that?
Absolutely. This is yet another conflict, Akshita, in which United Nations has failed to global expectations to play a significant role for the dispute resolution, for solving a problem. But see, that the United Nations born out of the ashes of the World War II.
Yeah.
We know that how this body was, formed by 51 member states. Yeah. And in fact,
this is what they're supposed to do.
They were supposed to do. At times, on a lighter note, I may see, I would like to make a simile or analogy like an RWA, which does not have any power. Yeah. The residents own the property. Yeah. They have their own rights.
So you see statements, condemnation, nothing
exactly.
more.
This is the ineffectiveness of United Nations as an institution. And if you see the post-COVID world, we have successively seen that, during the COVID crisis, we have seen how UN has failed. We have seen during the Armenia-Azerbaijan, we have seen in the case of, Russia-Ukraine conflict, and in the case of the recent, United States and Israel-led military strikes against Iran. So, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, raised voice, he has issued a statement, he has urged all parties, but besides that, they do not have, UN as an institution does not have any authority to contain the world powers, because the most powerful authority of United Nations rests with the United Nations Security Council. And see, two of the most important, most militarily powerful state members of the United Nations Security Council holding the veto power, United States and Russian Federation. They both are engaging in a military conflict, and they have their own justifications of that. And who knows, at a time when President Donald Trump, on 7th of January, he signed an executive order, Akshita, to exit from 31 UN bodies.
And to cut funding as well.
To cut funding as well. He does not,
believe in.
Yeah, exactly. And he does not hold United Nations as in a very high regard. And that's why, if you see, he is trying to carve out another institution called Board of Peace, chaired by himself.
Correct.
And chaired by the United States. And he has already garnered support and gathered members, and so maybe, who knows, he's trying to make an alternative system out of it. This adds to the ineffectiveness, and that also brings to the point, Akshita, that this is why India was warning, global the global community, the global order about this situation only. For long we have been asking that the current state of United Nations is not reflecting the global reality. Yeah. The world has changed. The most populous country on the planet, that is India, is not member of the Security Council. How can you justify that?
And it's been a campaign, an ongoing campaign that's resulted in nothing.
Japan, South Africa, the biggest country of the African continent. Even the continents are not represented adequately in a body. How can you expect that body to effectively work?
But explain something to me, Pranay. In the statements that have come in post the strikes and the conflict that's played out, has there been any statement that's come in from the UN chief condemning the strikes, condemning what happened, or even condemning Trump? Any of that?
No, that's why he only issued statement. He said that, United Nations urge that military conflict is not the solution. All parties should exercise restraint. But if it is all about the nuclear program, Akshita, the IAEA, the mandated body, to monitor the nuclear program of all nuclear power state or any nation for that matter. The IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, amid this entire, the phase these last 7 days, he has issued a statement and he said that IAEA does not have any evidence to suggest or to prove that Iran possesses nuclear weapon. However, he used the rider as well, and he said that Iran did not allow us to inspect certain facility and this raised suspicion. So we urge Iran to open up, to exercise transparency and come to table. But besides that, the military action is already on Iran and we know where is it leading to.
Yeah, very true. Thanks very much, Pranay, for joining us. Serious questions that really need to be asked of these international organizations. They're the ones supposed to be monitoring the situation, calling out countries that overstep, that go ahead and overstep the red line that's been drawn. None of that actually happening. And so there's a need for serious introspection on that as well. Remember that moment, and this has been a big headline grabbing point, of a US submarine that sank an Iranian warship off the southern coast of Sri Lanka, killing so many sailors, 80 plus, and dramatically expanding Washington's operations against the Iranian Navy, making it clear that any Iranian Navy asset isn't safe anywhere, any of the seas. Sri Lanka's Deputy Foreign Minister identified the warship as IRIS Dana, saying it was returning to Iran from an eastern Indian port from Vizag. We know that now. This attack happened hundreds of miles across the Indian Ocean from the Gulf, where US and Israeli forces are, of course, striking Iran. Tehran is retaliating with missile and drone attacks. But what do the rules of the sea actually say in times of conflict? Let's break that down for you. As far as legal obligations go, warships of belligerent states can be considered as very often legitimate targets during this kind of an armed conflict. So yes, you do see this happen. Unfortunately, it's happened several times in history as well. Warships on high seas are immune from the jurisdiction really of any state other than their flag state. There are several of these articles that I'm reading out for you. Government ships used solely for non-commercial purposes also enjoy full immunity. But humanitarian obligations is something we must highlight. Even in wartime, crew and civilians must be protected. I'll again reiterate, crew, civilians must be protected even during wartime. There's a duty to render assistance to those in distress, which is what Sri Lanka has been doing to help in search and rescue coordination as well. That's again a humanitarian obligation. Again, something that Sri Lanka has stepped up in. Even the Indian Navy has helped in coordination of search and rescue operations. Now, beyond that also, ensuring the safety of life and medical care. This is to the crew, all those on board, providing access to refuge and also delivering aid without discrimination. These are the humanitarian obligations. Sri Lanka and India have been doing it. US, of course, did not consider the number of casualties. And that's what's led to also questions about whether even in wartime, America, yes, struck a warship, but should they have ensured that help was given to the crew as well? Is that a humanitarian obligation? They failed. As the war continues right now in West Asia, like I said, it's been 1 week, 7 days. What happens next? We've decoded here for you on India Today 6 scenarios of what could be the outcome of this war. Not what's going to play out, but what will be the outcome. This is now the 2nd week of the conflict. We've seen a whole lot of risks and implications for the entire region, I dare say even for the entire world. But what are the 6 scenarios we're looking at? We're putting out the first scenario for you, that the regime actually weathers this particular storm, in which case the Iranian regime stays intact. Donald Trump doesn't get what he wants, which is ultimately a regime change. The second scenario, that Iran is plunged into civil war, into chaos, and we've seen this happen far too often as a result of military operations by US. So many countries that are in the grip of a civil war or an absolute internal chaos. Will this happen in Iran? Is a big question mark. The third scenario is that there's negotiations that take place, that there is some sort of a ceasefire. Now, this looks unlikely simply because statements from both sides seem to suggest that no, there's no negotiation that can happen right now. So far, any attempts at mediation, any of that hasn't really worked. Scenario number 4, regional conflagration, which is that you see all of, in fact, these regional players getting involved. It's already playing out essentially, which is why across the Middle East now countries have been thrown in. Across the Mediterranean, some countries have been involved in this conflict. Scenario number 5 is what we're referring to as the Maduro model, which I'll explain in just a bit. It's also got to do, of course, with what happened in Venezuela. Will you see something like that in Iran? And scenario number 6 is swift transition under US backing, someone who the US approves of, who Donald Trump approves of. That could be someone like Reza Pahlavi. Let's decode this one by one for you. I'll begin with scenario 1, where Iran's leadership survived sustained bombing campaigns, possibly installing a hardline cleric or a politically weak figure controlled by the Revolutionary Guards of Iran. Nuclear and missile programs are pushed underground, leaving the country isolated but potentially nuclear capable, which means other countries would not dare touch Iran. What we're talking about then is a North Korea-style country, state, repressive, secretive, resilient, highly unpredictable, which means that countries will not dare touch them.
It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon.
That nuclear material, as you mentioned a moment ago, is nuclear material that could potentially be used for manufacturing nuclear weapons. This doesn't mean there are nuclear weapons right now, but that material exists, and it could have that use.
Scenario 2. Extended attacks weaken the regime, that you see a regime collapse and then civil war in Iran, sparking massive protests, sparking military defections and ethnic separatist movements as well. The country then, Iran, could fragment along basically several community lines and groups, Azeri, the Kurdish, Balochi and other minority lines. Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium becomes a strategic prize, potentially at risk of theft or sale. It could land up in the wrong hands, which is then all the more dangerous. Humanitarian consequences in this kind of scenario of civil war and chaos is always huge, severe. Millions displaced and regional instability increasing. We've seen this happen in several countries, and in many cases, it is the result of US intervention. Could this happen in Iran? Here's what Donald Trump has spoken of, where he talks about arming Kurdish forces.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days.
I can comment on the fact that the president has held many calls with partners, allies, and leaders in the region, in the Middle East. He did speak to Kurdish leaders with respect to our base that we have in northern Iraq. But as for any report suggesting that the president has agreed to any such plan is completely false and should not be written.
Okay, let's focus on scenario 3, ceasefire, negotiations, talks between Iran, Israel and America. What you will then see, and this is the ideal scenario, which is that there's then limited strikes or targeted airstrikes, which then create some conditions for talks. Israel will halt attacks after neutralizing the threats that they have assessed, key nuclear military sites. America then mediates some sort of compromise. This is, like I said, the best case scenario, that negotiations could temporarily contain the conflict, focusing on nuclear restrictions, importantly on regional de-escalation and security guarantees. Peace, however, remains fragile, but this is the best we can hope for looking at what's playing out. Is this something that's on the table? Negotiations, is it possible? Well, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said Iran now is ready for a ground invasion. So it looks like Iran thinks this is only going to ramp up. Donald Trump says too late for talks.
I'm once again calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military and the police, to lay down their arms. They're only going to be killed. And now is the time to stand up for the Iranian people and help take back your country. You're going to have a chance after all these years to take back your country. Accept immunity. We'll give you immunity. And we'll be giving you really the right side of history, because that's what it is. So you'll be perfectly safe with total immunity, or you'll face absolutely guaranteed death. And I don't want to see that. They don't want to see it either. We also urge Iranian diplomats around the world to request asylum and to help us shape a new and better Iran with great potential. It's a country with great potential. There's much better future for Iran. It's now beginning. It's going to be, I think, a great future. And the United States will ensure that whoever leads the country next, Iran will not threaten America or its neighbors, Israel.
Okay, scenario 4. Regional conflagration. We've already seen the conflict could spread beyond Iran and Israel. There's already support from Russia or China for Tehran, but that could then ramp up with, in fact, military support perhaps, coupled with proxy actions in Lebanon, Yemen or the Gulf, and that triggers a wider regional war. This scenario carries high civilian casualties, potential refugee crises and major economic shocks globally. Unfortunately, we're already seeing large parts of this playing out. The Gulf is already involved in how they've been targeted in so many of the strikes by Iran, the US bases. Russia has condemned Israel and US openly. China has offered to mediate. The question is whether they'll enter this conflict too. US actions in Venezuela, Iran's leadership might be replaced by a more cooperative figure. This is scenario number 5, that US gets its way. There's a regime change and someone who's US friendly is actually brought in Iran. So then there's internal control by the regime, but nuclear capabilities, economic concessions, all of that is handed over in a platter to America or allied companies. Hostilities end quickly, but internal repression continues, and Iran's regional posture shifts to align with US strategic interests. The Maduro model, we call it, because of what's played out in Venezuela with the abduction of Maduro in Venezuela. It's now a US-friendly nation. That's scenario number 5. Scenario 6 is that you see, in fact, a swift US-backed transition. Now, this is more or less like scenario 5, but except that it's less dramatic and less likely too. Iran's armed forces, the Revolutionary Guard, surrender. Opposition factions unite. There's an interim government under, let's say, a Reza Pahlavi or another leader takes power. Nuclear facilities are handed over, energy markets are opened, and elections are scheduled. This is, like I said, highly, highly unlikely looking at what's playing out currently. So we've given you 6 scenarios. What's the most likely looking at the situation right now? Well, the battle lines in West Asia are only hardening because you've got now Donald Trump sending across a very clear message. He's not just calling for Iran's surrender, but also weighing in on who should not lead Tehran next. Iran has firmly rejected this, but US is pushing hard to ensure that this is a leadership, a regime in Iran that favors them.
The battle lines in West Asia are hardening by the hour. On day 7 of the US-Israel offensive against Iran, rhetoric from Washington has turned sharper, with the White House openly questioning Tehran's leadership and even weighing in on who could rule Iran next. President Donald Trump has escalated his offensive rhetoric, urging Iran to surrender and claiming Tehran had reached out for peace talks, a claim that Iran has flatly denied.
Once again, calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military and the police to lay down their arms. They're only going to be killed. So you'll be perfectly safe with total immunity, or you'll face absolutely guaranteed death. And I don't want to see that.
Trump said Iranian missiles are being destroyed every hour in their operations. The US president also declared that Iran has effectively lost its air defense and air force capability.
We're destroying more of Iran's missiles and drone capability every single hour. Their anti-aircraft weapons are gone, so they have no air force, they have no air defense.
In a striking offer, Trump said immunity could be granted to members of Iran's police and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps if they abandon the regime and stand on the right side of history. He also suggested that Iranian diplomats stationed around the world could seek asylum. However, in an intervention into Iran's domestic politics, Trump said the US must have a role in determining the country's future leadership, rejecting the prospect of Mojtaba Khamenei emerging as the next supreme leader. Tehran, on the other hand, has dismissed Trump's claims outright. Iranian officials say no request for peace talks were made and that trust between the two sides have collapsed, making negotiations virtually impossible. With the battlefield heating up and rhetoric crossing into regime politics, the war is no longer just about missiles and strikes. It is now about the future of power in Iran itself. Bureau Report, India Today.
And there's a tense standoff brewing between Anthropic, an AI company, and the US government. This is over access to the AI model Claude, which I'm sure you've heard of. Washington has pushed for full unrestricted access under a $200 million classified contract, potentially to use Claude for weapons, for intelligence, and for combat operations. The company, Anthropic, is drawing a firm line. The company is refusing to remove safeguards that prevent mass surveillance and has rejected fully autonomous killer weapons. The US government has called out the company, calling this refusal virtue signaling that could endanger American troops, and warns that a company's terms of service cannot override the US Constitution. Officials have also flagged supply chain risks if Claude is withheld. Anthropic has countered this particular charge from the US government, saying Claude is trained to refuse misuse, and that includes spying on citizens or directing lethal operations. They insist they can still support national security without crossing ethical lines, but they've made it very clear there's no question of government intervention that will be allowed. Now, experts warn that this clash underscores a bigger concern of giving governments unchecked control over AI that could undermine ethical safeguards, turn powerful models into weapons, and shift strategic advantages to rivals. Claude, in particular, is viewed as critical for sensitive operations, turning the standoff into a high-stakes battle at the intersection of ethics, innovation, and national security, and perhaps one that you could see out play in many, many more countries. Let's focus now on the big headline that's emerged from poll-bound Tamil Nadu. There's been a lot of talk of TVK chief Vijay and whether he'll have any impact in the upcoming elections. Amid that, a couple of days ago, a divorce petition came to the fore, filed by his wife Sangeeta, where he accused her of having an illicit relationship with an actor. Last night, Vijay for the first time stepped out with actor Trisha for a wedding reception, to attend a reception in the city of Chennai. And it set off a whole lot of speculation on exactly what the relationship is and what's the messaging Vijay intends to send across to his family or even to his fans, considering now that he is a politician, his private affairs is now thrust in the public spotlight.
TVK chief Vijay and actor Trisha making a public appearance for the first time off-screen together. Vijay and Trisha attended a wedding reception in Chennai last night together, arriving in the same car and leaving together. The rumours mills have been on an overdrive for the last many days about Vijay and Trisha being a couple, but with this appearance, Vijay has made it clear he remains unfazed by all the rumours. This appearance also importantly comes days after Vijay's wife Sangeeta's divorce application was made public, in which she accused him of being in an illicit relationship with an actor. Vijay's wife has claimed he had betrayed marital trust by continuing his affair with an actor she did not name for years. She also accused him of emotionally and mentally neglecting her. Many fans jumped to conclusion that the actor's wife was referring to Trisha, but there has been no mention of her name by Vijay's wife. Vijay, with this public appearance now with Trisha, will keep the rumor swirling, but he's sending out a message that he does not care about any of this speculation. Bureau Report, India Today.
So is Vijay sending across a message that it's nobody's business, he doesn't care about any of the rumors or the speculation? Or is he trying to also send across a message that at this point, considering the divorce petition is public, he's no longer going to hold back what exactly has been playing out? I want to bring in on this broadcast Dr. Suman C. Raman and Shekhar Iyer to kind of decode what this messaging really means. Dr. Suman C. Raman, I'd like to begin with you. Was this a good idea? Because, you see all of the speculation on social media, all of the talk of illicit relationship, etc. for a politician to be wrapped in this kind of a narrative. Is it a good idea?
No, in Tamil Nadu, Akshita, I think you will also be well aware that none of these actually have an impact with the electorate. Tamil Nadu has a long history of politicians with the multiple families and so on. So I don't see this as this is his personal matter, and I don't think that this is going to impact the elections or his electoral chances. The only issue of concern here is some of the allegations in that leaked, petition which his wife has filed, which was, one thing, who leaked it to the media first. That itself was, there are only two possibilities. One is somebody from the lady's side has leaked it, or, somebody has taken that from the court. This was filed in December and it got leaked in February. So I think that itself is not great as far as politics is concerned. This is a personal matter, but in that there are certain other allegations which I'm not referring to the relationship, but beyond that there are certain allegations.
Is this also in a way then, sir, corroborating those allegations when Vijay steps out with a co-star, with a colleague?
No, that is being corroborated is an open secret, Akshita. The point is it going to have a political impact is the question. Politically in Tamil Nadu, this does not have an impact. In fact, I don't want to go as far as to say that sometimes, sadly, this is seen as something which is expected of a senior politician. No, right? And we can go into the various political parties and without discussing what...
No, but you could argue also, Dr. Subhadri Raman, that was, generational. That in this current times in Tamil Nadu, would it be something that's acceptable? Mr. Shekhar Iyer, I'll bring you in on this, particularly on the point that, here's a party, TVK and Vijay himself, who's been attempting in every single way to woo the woman vote. Attempting to woo the woman vote, and then, when you step out with a female colleague at a time when you're facing these allegations of being in an illicit relationship, is it the right message? Are you then alienating that woman vote?
Well, I think the very purpose of their appearance at a wedding reception yesterday was to actually challenge those people who have been going berserk on social media. Ever since this petition surfaced, the bloggers who are seen as a part of the ruling party's social media machinery, they have been going berserk with all kinds of stories, bordering on character assassination of Trisha as well as Vijay, and then making a case for Sangeeta. We do not know exactly what's going on between them. But Trisha and Vijay's public appearance at social functions is not new, because they have been friends for more than 20 years. The first film was Gilly in 2004. Yeah. That apart, but definitely Sangeeta's petition, and if that is a petition which she has filed because what has come out is a document and it doesn't have a court stamp or anything. And just as Dr. Subhathi Raman said, who brought it out, why it came out now, and there are already stories,
No, but amid
her
that, the
family-
timing of Vijay's appearance with Trisha, yes, they've shared the screen together for decades now. But for them to come together for an off-screen event right after the divorce petition became public is what's triggered all of the questions about what is the messaging he's intending to send. But I leave it at that, Mr. Shekhar Iyer and Dr. Sumansi Raman. Thank you for joining us. Several countries have been talking about a ban on social media, and now that discourse has reached India as well. Karnataka government is the first state in the country to be going ahead and talking about implementing a ban on social media for children under 16. They've highlighted cyberbullying. They've highlighted depression as a result of too much on-screen time to say that this is the need of the hour. You've had conversations about this with other states too. Karnataka, though, has announced that they will be implementing this ban very, very soon. And as we get you all the details about the particular statement that's come in from the Karnataka Chief Minister, the government right now has maintained that there is going to be very soon this particular decision and the ban will be implemented. But let's talk about why this is being done. Well, essentially, the Karnataka government has highlighted several reasons: that it lowers self-esteem and disrupts sleep. It sets unrealistic ideas of beauty, which is extremely harmful to these children because it's kind of shaping up what they're thinking. And such a time to have that kind of exposure of unrealistic ideals of beauty is extremely dangerous. It also ensures exposure to violent and inappropriate content. There's very little regulation or censorship of content on social media and what children really are fed, which is the other harmful effect. It reinforces stereotypes and also promotes cyberbullying, which has unfortunately become far too common, particularly among teenagers.